If you've ever worked somewhere long enough, it becomes part of your identity, not just your resume. You stop saying, "I work at Flair Creative," and start saying, "We just landed a big campaign." Then we slips in without you noticing. That's how deep the roots go. My name is Vanessa Clark. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 10 years, I worked at a boutique branding agency in downtown Phoenix called Flair Creative. I didn't start with some glamorous title or corner office. I started as a brand coordinator, which is just a fancy way of saying I did everything no one else wanted to do, and I did it well. I was the last one out most night and the first one in most mornings. I knew what typeface paired best with which shade of orange for skincare packaging. I could tell you what time of day Instagram engagement peaked for baby formula ads versus boutique gym franchises. I lived and breathed that place, and I helped build it from a 3-person operation working out of a loft above a smoothie bar to a full-stack agency with national clients, conference invites, and a waiting list of people wanting to intern there. I never asked to be praised. I just wanted to be respected. And for a long time I was. Or so I thought. The morning everything changed started like most others. Arizona mornings have this golden quality to them, especially in late March. It's not hot yet, just warm enough that your skin remembers what summer feels like. I was running 5 minutes late, which for me, was borderline scandalous. I usually arrived by 7:45, coffee in hand, earbuds in, already drafting campaign notes in my head before I even hit the elevator. That day, I pulled into the garage at 8:05. My head was pounding from a slight hangover, not from alcohol, but from fatigue. We had just wrapped a 4-month campaign for a startup out of Austin, and the final pitch meeting had gone so well, I thought we'd all be celebrating. But instead, I was told by Miles, our CEO and someone I once called a friend, to hold off on next steps until Monday. I should have sensed something then. His tone wasn't cold, exactly, but it wasn't Miles either. Not the Miles I knew, who used to order Thai food at midnight while we tweaked mood boards for fragrance ads. This Miles was tight-lipped. Distracted. His eyes darted around the room like he couldn't look at me directly. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe he was tired too. Maybe something big was coming, a merger, a new client, a company pivot. My mind spun optimistic webs because the alternative, that something was wrong, wasn't even a possibility in my head. When I walked into the office, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Normally by 8:15, the place buzzed with energy. Keurigs hissing in the break room. Spotify playlists echoing from someone's desk. Jordan from design laughing at his own jokes. But that day, it was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped off the elevator and into the open-plan workspace. Everyone was there. Every desk was filled, but the energy was off. Eyes glanced at me and away again. Whispers stopped mid-sentence. The kind of behavior you associate with middle school cafeterias and horror movies, not grown adults with MacBooks. I walked toward my office, third door on the left, and that's when I saw it. My nameplate was gone. The brushed metal sign that once read Vanessa Clark, Senior Brand Strategist, had been removed. In its place was a newer, shinier plate, Carly Simmons, Executive Brand Director. My stomach dropped so fast I felt like I was falling. Carly. She had been hired 6 months ago as a junior content strategist. 24, straight out of NYU, with a portfolio full of pastel aesthetics and TikTok dance campaigns. She once pitched a client using memes from The Bachelor. I remember feeling both mildly impressed and completely horrified. Still, I trained her. I gave her my time, my notes, my connections. I answered her late-night texts about slide decks. I gave her feedback with patience. I was never threatened, why would I be? Until now. Before I could even process what I was seeing, I heard footsteps behind me. Vanessa, a voice said. It was cold. Flat. I turned. Miles was standing there, flanked by Gina from HR and another girl I didn't recognize, probably someone from legal. I opened my mouth to speak, but Miles raised a hand like he was hailing a cab. "Can we talk in the conference room?" The walk down that hallway was the longest of my life. I could feel eyes following me. No one said a word. No one stood up. My footsteps echoed like I was already a ghost. Inside the conference room, they didn't even sit. Miles kept his arms folded, like he was trying to keep his guilt from falling out. Gina opened a manila folder and began reading from a prepared statement. My role had been eliminated due to strategic realignment. My contributions were appreciated. My severance was in line with company policy. That was it. No discussion. No warning. No real explanation. I looked at Miles, hoping, praying, he would say something human. That he'd explain. Apologize. Say it wasn't personal. But all he did was avoid my eyes and mumble, "It's just time for fresh direction." Fresh direction. I had built the damn road, and now I wasn't even allowed to walk on it. Security was called. Someone from IT had already disabled my email access. A cardboard box had been placed on my desk with all my personal belongings, 3 framed photos, a pair of emergency flats, and my succulent plant named Lorna, who had outlived 4 interns and 1 failed product launch. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't speak. Not really. I walked. Past every desk. Past every person who suddenly found their screen extremely interesting. Past the interns who used to bring me lattes, and past the creative team who once begged for my sign-off on campaigns. None of them said a word. It was like I had never existed. By the time I got to the elevator, my heart was pounding so loud I thought I might faint. The doors opened, and I stepped in, alone. Just as the doors were closing, a hand reached through and stopped them. It was Harriet. Harriet had been the front desk manager since before I joined. She was in her 60s, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and always had a Werther's Original in her pocket. She greeted everyone with a "Good morning, baby," and remembered every birthday. In her hand, she held a small black envelope. "You'll want this," she said quietly. I took it without thinking. She didn't say another word. The doors closed. And just like that, I was gone. That night, I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for hours, past the office, past the neon taco trucks, past the 24-hour Walgreens where I once bought coffee creamer at midnight during a deadline rush. Eventually, I parked outside a park I hadn't visited in years. Papago Park. There was a bench under a tree that looked over the desert hills, and I used to go there when I needed to think. Back when I first moved to Phoenix. Back when I still believed that working hard was enough to keep you safe. I sat there for hours. At some point, I opened the envelope. Inside was a key. A single, matte black key. Old-fashioned, not like a house or car key. It looked almost antique. Taped to it was a note in Harriet's handwriting: "They forgot who you are. Remember for them." I stared at the key for a long time. At first, I thought maybe it was symbolic. A gesture. Something sweet, poetic, useless. But something about it felt real. And dangerous. And absolutely right. If you asked Miles what happened to me after that day, he'd probably shrug and say I took time off. That I disappeared. That I handled things privately. And in a way, he'd be right. Because after the elevator doors closed behind me, I didn't scream or cause a scene. I didn't blast them on social media or email our client list like a scorned ex. I went quiet, by design. Let them think I was licking my wounds. Let them think I was devastated. That I was sitting in my dark apartment, stress-eating ice cream and Googling how to recover after being fired. I gave them that image, because the truth? It would have terrified them. The truth is, I didn't disappear. I went underground. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't under a deadline, a Slack notification, or a meeting calendar colored in blocks of blue. I wasn't expected to deliver 10 ideas in 30 minutes or save a junior strategist from pitching a client campaign that relied entirely on emojis. I was free. And that freedom, at first, felt like grief. When you've wrapped your identity around your job for so long, losing it feels like losing a limb. There were mornings when I still reached for my work phone, forgetting I didn't have one anymore. There were nights I woke up thinking I was late for a presentation that no longer existed. But in that quiet space, something strange happened. I started thinking clearly for the first time in years. The noise of Flair Creative, the egos, the politics, the 2 a.m. urgent requests that never really were, had been keeping me so busy that I hadn't realized how numb I'd become. Numb to how Miles had changed. How he stopped listening. How his compliments became thinner. How Carly's rise wasn't accidental. I saw it all now, sharp and crystal clear. So, I started digging. The first thing I did was pull out the backup drive I kept from every project I'd ever worked on, a little black external hard drive I nicknamed the Vault. Technically, I was supposed to delete it when we transitioned to a new system, but I didn't. Not out of spite, just habit. And let me tell you, the Vault was a treasure trove. Every successful campaign. Every pitch deck. Every winning rebrands. Every logo concept, tagline, influencer partnership, I had it all. Names. Dates. Budgets. Metrics. Client emails praising the work. Even the files Carly tried to pass off as her own. I had the originals, with my metadata stamped on every single one. I opened a blank document and titled it, Receipts. Page after page, I compiled proof. Not for legal reasons, I wasn't looking to sue. No. What I was building was much better than a lawsuit. I was building a story. One that ended with Flair Creative becoming irrelevant, and me, unforgettable. At the same time, I started reaching out, carefully, quietly, to people I trusted. I called Maya, a photographer I'd worked with on the skincare account. She had left Flair a year ago after clashing with Miles, and I hadn't heard from her since. She picked up on the second ring. "Vanessa," she said. "Holy shit. I was hoping I'd hear from you." Turns out, I wasn't the only one Miles had burned. Maya connected me with Grace Voss, a former client who owned a wellness tech startup out of Austin. We'd worked on her launch campaign 2 years ago, and she'd loved the direction I gave her. Grace answered my email in 10 minutes. Her reply? "Vanessa. I've been waiting for this moment. Let's talk." We set up a Zoom call the next day. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't wear my Flair-approved blazer. I wore a black hoodie and tied my hair in a messy bun because I didn't want to pretend anymore. Grace didn't care. She grinned the second she saw me. "I remember that fire in your eye," she said. "Tell me what happened." So, I did. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She nodded through the whole thing. Then she said the words that lit the fuse, "You made my brand what it is. Let's do it again, this time, together." Grace offered me a consulting contract that same day. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't come with a corner office. It came with possibility. A seat at the table. Real partnership. It was enough. While that part of my life began to bloom, the other part, the revenge, started to take shape, slowly and with precision. I watched Flair Creative from a distance, like a scientist studying a dying species. Their Instagram feed was a mess, inconsistent colors, trendy fonts, recycled posts. No voice. No soul. The LinkedIn page was worse. They'd lost 2 major clients. A third had paused their engagement, which is corporate speak for "we're done" without saying "we're done." And Carly? Well, Carly had started posting selfies from the office, all ring light angles and vague captions like "another day with the dream team #bossvibes." In one of the posts, she stood in front of a whiteboard with a pitch deck I had written. I zoomed in. Slide 4 still had my original draft title, typo and all. I took a screenshot. Another receipt. Around this time, I also discovered that Flair's domain name was about to expire. I'd subscribed to a site that tracked DNS renewals, purely out of curiosity at first, and saw that corporaterevenge was about to lapse. It was set to auto-renew, but their billing contact had changed recently. I took a gamble. I waited. And on the morning of the deadline, it happened, the auto-renew failed. Maybe a missed email. Maybe someone in accounting dropped the ball. I pounced. I bought the domain in less than 60 seconds. And just like that, I controlled their front door. I didn't redirect it to anything flashy. Not yet. I just created a single landing page, black background, white text, centered on the screen. It read, "What happens when you remove the heart from a brand? You lose the beat." Underneath, a button that said enter. And behind that? My portfolio. My real one. No agency name. No fake team bios. Just me. Grace and I worked day and night over the next 3 months. I helped her launch EVIR, a wellness app with a sleek interface, trauma-informed design, and messaging that didn't sound like it came from a robot in yoga pants. She paid me generously, yes, but more importantly, she gave me a space to build again. Not just for her. For me. Word spread. A friend of hers, Trisha DeWitt, founder of a women's fintech startup in San Diego, reached out. Then a former Flair client, anonymously, asked if I could take over their digital narrative quietly. Before I knew it, I had a wait list. I hadn't even built a company yet, and I had a wait list. I named it Black Key Studio, after the mysterious key Harriet gave me. That key never ended up opening anything literal, but I kept it on my desk as a reminder of what I'd unlocked inside myself. My website tagline was simple: you don't need a big team. You need the right one. I didn't advertise. I didn't post selfies. I let the work speak. And it did. Loudly. 3 months after Flair fired me, I got a call from Jessie, one of the account managers who stayed behind. She'd always been kind to me, even when others played politics. She called from her personal number. "I'm not supposed to be calling you," she said. "Then don't," I replied. She paused. "You were right." "About what?" "Everything." Turns out, morale had cratered. 2 more creatives quit. Clients were complaining. Carly had tried to lead a pitch on her own, and it had bombed so hard the client walked out mid-slide. And Miles? He was consulting with investors about restructuring again. I thanked her for the call. And I went back to work. Because I wasn't done yet. The final piece came during a local creative expo downtown, something Flair had RSVP'd to every year. They always had a booth with balloons, branded notebooks, and Miles giving a speech no one asked for. This year, they showed up late. Their booth looked half-finished. Their signage was crooked. No one wore matching shirts. You could feel the desperation seeping from the edges. I didn't have a booth. I had a lounge. A velvet-curtained mini-gallery space with framed stills of campaigns I'd worked on. Soft jazz played. People came in, sat down, asked questions. They stayed. Grace flew in from Austin. Trisha from San Diego. Even Maya showed up with her camera, capturing it all. And then I saw him, Miles, walking toward me. He looked older. Smaller. Like he had aged in dog years. "Vanessa," he said, trying for casual. "I wasn't sure that was you." "It is," I said, sipping my cold brew. He glanced around. "Nice setup." "Thanks." Pause. "You know," he said, "I've been meaning to reach out. Maybe grab coffee sometime, talk about—" "No," I interrupted. He blinked. "No?" I handed him a card. Black background. White text. No name. Just the Black Key Studio logo. "Enjoy the show," I said. It's about what happens when you remove the heart from a brand. It's funny how building something for yourself feels so different than building something for someone else, even when the work looks the same. At Flair Creative, I used to call it the shine. That moment when a campaign hit just right, when a product's voice, imagery, and audience came together in a seamless story. That was the rush. But looking back, I realize now the shine was never really mine. I was polishing someone else's mirror. Someone else's name. Someone else's dream. This time, it was different. With Black Key Studio, the shine came from the inside out. I wasn't just building a business, I was designing a life I didn't want to escape from. But it wasn't instant. And it wasn't perfect. Let's start with the basics. I had no office. My headquarters was a converted second bedroom in my apartment in Central Phoenix, the same room that used to house mismatched bookshelves, half-dead plants, and a pile of "I'll deal with that later" boxes. But I cleared the space. I painted the walls a muted slate blue. I dragged in an old desk from a thrift shop and strung up warm-toned lights. I stuck the black key Harriet had given me right above my monitor. A symbol. A promise. Grace was my first official client, and a generous one. She made sure I was paid well and on time, and she insisted I put my name on the credits for Ever's campaign launch. "No more ghosts," she told me. "You deserve to be seen." She was right. The EVIR launch was smoother than I expected. Clean messaging. Authentic voice. A rollout strategy that didn't rely on trends but on truth. We didn't chase likes. We chased loyalty. And it worked. Grace landed a $2.4 million seed round just 3 months after launch. VCs cited the brand clarity and customer resonance as key factors in their decision. She gave me full credit in every interview. Suddenly, I wasn't just a consultant. I was the woman who rebuilt a brand that investors trusted. And the inquiries started rolling in. But I was careful. I wasn't interested in scaling fast. That was Flair's mistake, growth for the sake of growth. I wanted meaning. Alignment. Projects that challenged me but didn't deplete me. So, I built a blueprint. A system. A process. Not just for branding, for how I would run my life. Every inquiry that came in went through a personal filter I wrote out in a journal. Does this client know who they are, or are they chasing someone else's path? Is their product or service solving something real, or is it a status symbol? Will this work make me feel proud to have my name attached? If I answered no to any of those, I declined. Politely. Firmly. I turned down a $30,000 contract from a crypto startup because their pitch included the word disruption 9 times in a single paragraph. I refused a diet pill brand that wanted to use before and after ads targeted at new moms. I didn't judge their hustle, I just knew it wasn't mine. Instead, I said yes to a Latino-owned bakery in Albuquerque launching a gluten-free pan dulce line. I said yes to a queer-owned candle brand from Portland that wanted to create a scent series inspired by breakup recovery. And I said yes to Trisha DeWitt, the fintech founder from San Diego, who told me, "I want to make money feel safe for women again." I wasn't just choosing work. I was choosing the world I wanted to live in. Step 2, stay quiet but visible. Flair taught me one important thing: the loudest person in the room isn't always the smartest, but they will get hired if no one smarter speaks up. So, I didn't stay silent. I just chose my words carefully. Instead of marketing myself, I focused on showing up where it mattered. Every month, I wrote one long-form blog post on LinkedIn, no fluff, no SEO keywords, no 5 ways to lists. Just stories. Real ones. About the projects, the process, the behind-the-scenes decisions that made campaigns work, and the ones that didn't. One post was about how to name a brand without sounding like a password. Another was about why the phrase "target audience" makes people feel hunted. Another one was called "You don't need a logo, you need a point of view." They didn't go viral. But they resonated. Slowly, I built a following of thoughtful, creative entrepreneurs who wanted to do things differently. People who said things like, "Your post made me rethink my entire launch." Or "I showed this to my co-founder, we're reworking our mission statement." That was the shine. Not followers, impact. See, revenge isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about turning a story where you were the victim into one where you were the main character all along, and the plot twist was just a setup for your arc. And I wasn't just going to build something new. I was going to rewrite the story Flair told about me. So, I started telling mine. Not with bitterness. With truth. I gave a talk at a local design school titled The Myth of the Disposable Expert. I shared how corporate culture quietly discards women after a certain age, and how we often make ourselves small in order to survive it. I was invited onto 2 podcasts, one for women in branding, another for creatives navigating career pivots. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The story spoke for itself. 1 week later, I got an email from someone using a Gmail account. Subject: I think I owe you an apology. It was Carly. The same Carly who took my office. The same one who posted photos with captions like #GrowBossLife. Her message wasn't long. But it was honest. I didn't understand how much of what I had was built by you. I'm starting to now. I wasn't ready. I hope someday you'll forgive me for how I handled things. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her. But because some stories are best left as lessons, not reunions. When the work grew too much for me to handle alone, I knew I had to expand. But I wasn't going to recreate the mess I left behind. I didn't want employees. I wanted co-creators. So, I reached out to women I respected, not just for their portfolios, but for how they moved through the world. Maya, the photographer, who had since started her own studio in Sedona. We collaborated on 3 visual campaigns that felt more like art than ads. Jules, a copywriter from Chicago, who specialized in radical honesty. Her tagline? I write like women talk when no one's interrupting. Lexi, a strategist from Atlanta who left her agency job after a C-suite exec told her diversity isn't a strategy. She helped me build onboarding systems that respected time, boundaries, and voice. We weren't a traditional agency. We were a studio with soul. We worked remotely, asynchronously, and with intention. Zoom meetings were rare. Deadlines were realistic. Mental health wasn't a policy, it was part of the process. And our clients felt it. One of them said, "This is the first time I've felt seen and sold at the same time." That line ended up in our brand manifesto. There's a strange guilt that creeps in when you start thriving after a betrayal, like you're supposed to keep mourning because someone else hurt you. I let go of that. I celebrated wins out loud. I posted behind the scenes of our studio process. I shared client shoutouts. I took a photo with the EVIR team the day they hit 100K downloads and captioned it, "When women root for each other, empires grow." I bought myself a desk I actually liked. I replaced my $12 Amazon chair with an ergonomic one that felt like it was hugging me. I installed floating shelves and filled them with candles, brand books, and a single framed quote, "You don't rise from the ashes by pretending they weren't fire." By the end of that year, Black Key Studio had worked with 11 clients. 7 were repeat engagements. 3 came from word of mouth only. 2 were legacy brands quietly reaching out to shift their voice, code for "We heard what you're doing and want to be part of it." Flair Creative, meanwhile, had posted a "closed for rebranding" message on their site. It never reopened. And Miles? Last I heard, he joined a fintech company as brand integration consultant. Whatever that means. I didn't care. I wasn't looking back. Because the most beautiful part of this blueprint wasn't the studio, or the clients, or the income. It was what happened inside of me. The part that remembered who I was before they tried to make me forget. The part that didn't wait to be chosen. The part that built the whole damn door, just so I could walk through it. Some twists come fast, like a slap you didn't see coming. Others unfold slowly, more like a chess game, where you don't realize you've already lost until the final piece moves and it's too late. This one? This was the slow kind. The kind that felt inevitable. By the time fall rolled around in Phoenix, if you can call it fall when the air still shimmers with heat, Black Key Studio wasn't just my comeback story. It was a full-on movement. We weren't the biggest. We weren't the loudest. But we were unmistakable. Every campaign we touched carried the same DNA: clarity, care, and voice. People started calling it the Black Key Effect. Clients began telling each other, if you want it done right, call Vanessa. We'd just wrapped a campaign for an eco-fashion label in Portland, and I'd finally taken a breath, one of those real, rib-deep exhales, when I got an invitation in the mail. It was sleek. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. Flair Creative Rebrand Reveal and Industry Mixer, RSVP required. I laughed out loud. So, they were trying again. Of course they were. The invitation was addressed to Black Key Studio, not me personally. Which meant either someone new had put my name on a list without knowing the history, or someone old wanted me there on purpose. I should have thrown it away. But I didn't. Because deep down, a part of me wanted to see it. Not out of vengeance, not anymore, but out of curiosity. I wanted to know what a ghost town looked like in daylight. The event was at an upscale rooftop venue in downtown Phoenix, one of those places with floor-to-ceiling glass walls, minimalist seating, and neon signs that said things like "Curate Your Future." I didn't wear black that night. I wore cobalt blue, because it made my skin glow and my eyes sharper. My hair was swept back, my heels made me feel 10 feet tall, and my lip color was named Resolve, which felt poetic. As I stepped into the space, heads turned. I'm not bragging. It wasn't just the outfit. It was the energy. That kind of grounded, electric calm that says, I didn't come here to ask for anything. I spotted Miles first, over by the bar. He was wearing a beige blazer that tried too hard and talking to a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I clocked at least 5 familiar faces, old teammates, interns who used to work under me, a couple of clients I hadn't seen in years. Some looked surprised. A few looked guilty. Only one approached. Jessie. The same account manager who once whispered, "You were right." She hugged me tight. I was hoping you'd come. I tilted my head. Was this you? She smiled. Not officially. I took a glass of wine from a passing server and moved toward the back where the big reveal would happen. Screens were set up. A branded display stood at the center with Flair's new slogan, Creative Courage. Commercial Clarity. It was fine. Safe. Predictable. But what caught my eye wasn't the words. It was the logo underneath. A stylized key. Black. Angled forward like a compass. My mouth actually dropped open. Because I knew that design. I hadn't created it, but I'd sketched something nearly identical, 6 years ago, in a strategy draft for a financial planning client. That pitch never got used. It had lived in my hard drive since. Apparently, someone had dug deep into the archives. I shouldn't have been shocked. But I was. I stepped forward, snapped a photo, and then, I left. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. That wasn't my style. I just walked away with a smile and a plan. The next morning, I sat down at my desk and pulled out the vault, my trusted external hard drive that now lived in a locked drawer. I found the file within minutes, Concept Brief VC Client Branding Draft Final V3, because we all know nothing is ever truly final. Inside was the original sketch. Timestamped. Watermarked. Accompanied by strategy notes, color theory, and even alt concepts that never saw the light of day. I could have sued them. I had enough to make things uncomfortable. But lawsuits are slow, messy, and loud. And I didn't want money. I wanted clarity. So, I made a call. Not to Miles. To Grace. I walked her through what happened. Do you want it public? She asked. No, I said. I want it useful. Together, we hatched something better than a cease and desist. We created a brand audit template, a public tool that companies could use to assess if their messaging was authentic or appropriated. We built it with a section on creative theft, ethical credit, and visual borrowing. We called it the Origin Protocol. We released it for free, branded by Black Key Studio, backed by EVIR. Within 72 hours, it was downloaded 18,000 times. Designers started tagging us. Creatives started sharing their stories. A thread went viral on X, formerly Twitter, about agencies that had borrowed work from ex-employees. The conversation exploded. And in that chaos, something subtle happened. Flair Creative started trending. Not in a good way. People began comparing their new logo to my old sketch. Someone leaked an internal doc showing the exact reference file. Suddenly, the rebrand wasn't a rebrand. It was a scandal. And not once, did I say a word. The twist wasn't that I got revenge. It was that I didn't need to. The story told itself. In the weeks that followed, Flair's social media accounts went silent. Their site posted a vague statement about navigating a period of internal reflection. Carly removed her title from LinkedIn. Miles? He vanished altogether. Meanwhile, Black Key Studio saw a 230% spike in inquiries. I brought in 2 new collaborators and started an initiative for emerging designers from marginalized communities, paid mentorship, creative credit, and a pathway to ownership. Because the best twist of all? Is becoming the person you used to need. One afternoon, a few months later, I was reorganizing old files when I found Harriet's note again. They forgot who you are. Remember for them. I pinned it next to the key on my studio wall. Because sometimes, the people who try to erase you are the ones who end up writing your legacy in bold, permanent ink. And sometimes, the key they took from you was never theirs to hold. The thing no one tells you about closure is this: it rarely shows up wearing a ribbon. You don't get a speech. No one confesses. There's no studio audience clapping in the background. Real closure is quieter. It's not what you hear, it's what you stop needing to say. For me, closure didn't arrive as an apology. It arrived as absence. By the time Flair Creative's website went dark for good, I didn't even flinch. There was no satisfaction in watching the logo vanish, no thrill when industry blogs whispered about their implosion. It all felt distant. Like a memory someone else had lived. And that was the most freeing part. I had finally become bigger than what happened to me. The first thing I did once the dust settled was take a real break. Not a work from the beach vacation. I mean a full disconnection. I turned off Slack. Set auto-responses. Told my team, now 5 women across 5 cities, to do the same. We called it a studio exhale. 2 weeks. No clients. No projects. Just breath. I flew to Santa Fe. Stayed in a little adobe casita with no Wi-Fi. Spent hours walking through art galleries, drinking lavender tea, and sketching on a notepad I hadn't touched in years. No logos. No briefs. Just raw, ugly, glorious lines. One afternoon, sitting on a red clay bench outside a bookstore, I wrote in my journal, "This isn't revenge. This is resurrection." When I came back, the studio felt different. Not because anything had changed physically. The walls were the same warm slate blue. My desk still sat under the shelves where the black key hung, right beside Harriet's note. But I had changed. I no longer felt like I was trying to prove something. Not to Miles. Not to Carly. Not even to myself. What I felt was control, calm, clear, earned control. I spent the following months focusing on what mattered most, not just growing the studio, but deepening its roots. We began taking fewer clients, but going deeper with each one. Full stack storytelling. Brand identity plus culture plus internal language. I started working one-on-one with founders who were rewriting their own narratives, women stepping out of partnerships, CEOs rebuilding after public mistakes, creators navigating the weight of being seen. It was healing, for them and for me. Because every time I helped someone reclaim their voice, I reclaimed mine too. Then, one morning in early April, I received an email. The subject line was simple: non-compete term expired. Formal notification. Inside was a cold paragraph from Flair's legal representation. A copy of the clause I'd signed 10 years earlier. A timestamp confirming that the 12-month restriction had officially ended. No note from Miles. No follow-up. Just formality. I read it once, then hit archive. No anger. No shaking hands. No tears. That was when I knew I was done needing closure from people who wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. A week later, something unexpected happened. I bumped into Jenna, Flair's former HR manager, in line at a bakery in downtown Phoenix. She looked thinner, not physically, just lighter. Like someone who'd been carrying a boulder for too long and had finally set it down. We locked eyes, both paused, then smiled. "You look free," she said. "I feel it," I replied. We got coffee and sat outside, letting the Arizona sun do its slow healing. She told me what I'd already sensed, that Flair's downfall wasn't just mismanagement. It was rot from the inside. That the silence around my firing wasn't apathy, it was fear. That people had wanted to speak up, but didn't know how. And then she said something I didn't expect. "When you left, something broke in all of us. Because if they could discard you, the woman who built the foundation, what did that mean for the rest of us?" I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, it meant they were already finished. They just didn't know it yet. That night, I walked into the studio after hours and sat on the floor. No lights. Just moonlight pouring through the window. I pulled out my old Flair ID badge, the one I never threw away, though I didn't know why. I looked at my face in the photo. Hair tighter. Smile more strained. A woman trying so hard to be palatable, professional, perfect. I kissed the plastic, whispered thank you, and dropped it in the trash. Not out of spite. Out of evolution. In the months that followed, Black Key Studio quietly transformed. We started offering workshops, not just for clients, but for the community. Classes on ethical branding. Creative recovery. Narrative healing. We called the series The Second Line. Named after the New Orleans tradition, where after a funeral, a brass band leads a joyful parade to honor life. Celebration even in grief. Movement even after loss. Our studio became that space. People came in carrying burnout, betrayal, creative wounds they couldn't name. And together, we danced them out. In pixels. In words. In ideas reborn. One night, during a feedback circle, a young woman named Nora stood up. She had left a high-paying tech job after being told she was too intense for leadership. Through tears, she said, "I thought I was broken. But this place reminded me I was just misplaced." Everyone applauded. And I just sat there, heart full, thinking, this is what revenge becomes when it heals. It becomes purpose. Then, as if the universe wanted to sign the epilogue with style, I got an email from an industry magazine. They were doing a feature titled, "The Women Reshaping Brand Culture in 2025. They wanted to interview me. Feature the studio. Highlight the second line. I said yes. Not because I needed the spotlight, but because I wanted the story to reach the women still stuck in their cubicles, wondering if they're crazy for wanting more. In the interview, the journalist asked me, "What would you say to someone who's just been publicly fired, humiliated, discarded, erased?" I smiled. Took a deep breath. And said, "Good. Now you're free. Don't rebuild what they took. Build something they can't touch." If the beginning of this story was about betrayal, and the middle was about rebuilding, then this last part, is about what comes after. Because healing isn't the end. It's the foundation. The work I do now doesn't always look glamorous from the outside. It's not always viral moments or perfect aesthetics. Sometimes it's sitting across from a founder who's sobbing because she was told for the third time this month that her voice is too much. Sometimes it's a Zoom call with a woman pitching her product in a whisper because she still doesn't believe she's allowed to take up space. And sometimes it's silence. A quiet room. A blank page. And the deep, deliberate choice to begin again, on our own terms. That's the real legacy. Not the business I built, but the belief I help others reclaim. A few months after the interview with Brand Ethos magazine, I was invited to give a closing keynote at a national creative summit in New York. The theme was voices that changed the landscape. My first instinct was to say no. I still don't love stages. I'm not a spotlight person. But something inside me, that same deep part that once walked away from a nameplate replaced by someone half my age, whispered, "This is what it looks like to lead." So, I said yes. The room was bigger than I expected. Over 300 people. Designers. Strategists. Founders. Writers. Interns. CEOs. People who had followed my story. Some who had lived parts of it themselves. I walked on stage in a black pantsuit and sneakers. I didn't use slides. I didn't start with a joke. I started with a truth. A year ago, I was escorted out of my office by security. Today, I'm here to tell you that losing the thing you thought defined you can be the start of your real life, not the end of it. There were tears. Nods. Quiet gasps in the back when I shared the part about reclaiming the Flair domain. But what mattered most was the stillness in the room, the kind that says, "We see you because we are you." When I stepped off the stage, I didn't feel victorious. I felt useful. And that meant more. Back at home, Black Key Studio had quietly become more than a branding firm. We were now a collective, an incubator, a sanctuary for women and non-binary creatives who had been told they were too loud, too emotional, too sensitive, too complicated, too honest. We started offering mini grants. We hosted brand therapy circles, not for businesses, but for people. We created a resource library of ethical design practices, mental health support, and funding strategies for creatives in marginalized communities. One day, I received a message from someone I didn't recognize. It read, "Hi Vanessa. I just opened a micro gallery in Asheville, North Carolina, thanks to the guide you published last year. I wanted you to know." I named it the Key Room. I sat with that message for a long time. Then I cried. Not the sharp, painful kind of cry that comes from grief. But the kind that says, "You did it. And you weren't alone." About a year after Flair disappeared, I visited the old building. I didn't plan it. I was downtown, running errands, and my feet just sort of carried me there. The office suite was empty. The windows, papered over. The lobby directory still had the nameplate, faded, Flair Creative, 8th floor. I stood in the lobby for a while. Let my memory play back like an old film reel. The coffee stains. The click of my heels down the hall. The sound of my name being read aloud by someone who didn't deserve to say it. And then, I let it go. Because that wasn't my story anymore. That was just the prequel. I now wear the black key on a chain around my neck. Not because I need the reminder, but because I want to give others something to recognize. A signal. A symbol. A story, silent but present. Sometimes, when I meet a client for the first time and they ask about it, I just say, "It used to unlock someone else's future. Now it opens mine." These days, people ask me, "What's next?" And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll open a second location. Maybe I'll disappear into the desert one day and paint. But whatever I do, I know this much: I won't be building someone else's empire ever again. I'll be building spaces where others are reminded of their worth. their voice, their vision. I'll be creating places where no one gets erased, where restructure isn't a code word for removal, and fresh direction doesn't mean replace the woman who built this with her bare hands. I'll be leaving doors open behind me, and making sure they don't slam shut on the ones coming next. Because legacy isn't what we leave behind when we die. It's what we build while we're alive that helps others live too. One night, months later, I found myself walking the same block where the story began, that glass tower downtown where I once believed my success lived. Only now, I saw it differently. I wasn't the girl behind the frosted glass, trying to prove she belonged. I was the woman in the streetlight's glow, heart steady, legacy in motion. And just before I crossed the street, I whispered something out loud. They tried to write me out. But I picked up the pen. And I kept walking.